Ah, good. You're here. Just in time. Come in, come in. Leave your worries at the door. Let's find our favorite blanket, wrap up in a little historical mystery, and let our minds wander through oil-painted, unsolved crimes. Welcome back to Tired Art Student, where we talk about art and history and 1,000 delightful tangents. Very, very slowly. And tonight is a story that begins with a locked door and ends in silence. No alarms, no sirens, just 13 empty frames still hanging on the walls of a Boston museum. If you've ever wondered what kind of person would steal a Rembrandt in the middle of the night and get away with it for decades, you're in for a treat. But first, before we open the case file, I'd love it if you could tap that little like button or give this channel a sleepy little subscribe. It helps more wandering minds find their way here. And if you're feeling especially generous, leave a comment letting me know which stolen masterpiece you tuck under your arm if no one was looking. Purely hypothetical, of course. Now, let's go back. Way back. Part 1. A woman, a museum, and a perfect storm. Let's begin not with the theft, but with the woman. Isabella Stewart Gardner. To understand the greatest unsolved art heist in history, you first have to understand her, because this wasn't just any museum. It was her house, her dream, her love letter to the world. Isabella Stewart Gardner was born in 1840 in New York City, the only child of a wealthy linen merchant. She was what they used to call spirited, which is polite Victorian code for utterly unstoppable. She read constantly, traveled extensively, refused to sit quietly. She married into another wealthy family, the Gardners of Boston, and found herself in the upper crust of the Boston Brahmin Society. But Isabella was not interested in tea parties and embroidery. She wanted more. More beauty, more knowledge, more soul, more. But in 1865, tragedy struck. Her young son died of pneumonia at just 2 years old. The grief devastated her, and in an effort to recover, her doctors prescribed travel. Yes, that used to be an actual medical recommendation. You seem depressed. Go to Europe. So Isabella did. With her husband Jack by her side, she began a lifelong love affair with Italy, France, the Netherlands, and all the art within them. She walked the halls of the Uffizi, stared up at the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, climbed stone steps in Venice, and studied Gothic altarpieces by candlelight. And she did more than just look. She learned. She became an art historian in her own right, and a very savvy collector. Over the years, Isabella and Jack began to acquire pieces, paintings, tapestries, manuscripts, ancient Roman coins, furniture, Persian miniatures, Venetian glass. When Jack died in 1898, Isabella poured her grief into one last enormous project, a museum, but not just any museum, a palace. Fenway Court. She called it Fenway Court, modeled after a 15th century Venetian palazzo. It was built in the fens of Boston on marshy reclaimed land. It had a 3-story interior courtyard filled with flowers and ancient sculptures. Balconies hung with tapestries. Rooms filled with carved wood ceilings and stained glass and oriental rugs. She didn't just collect art. She curated experiences. Paintings were arranged not by school or period, but by her own poetic logic. A Titian might hang next to a Chinese vase. A medieval manuscript might sit near a Sargent portrait. It was like stepping into the mind of a woman who read everything and remembered all of it. And when Fenway Court opened in 1903, it became the center of Boston's cultural life. Isabella wore a white headband that said, "Oh, you Red Sox," in rubies. She kept a pet monkey. She once walked a lion on a leash. She was, let's say, delightfully eccentric. But she had one rule. She wrote it into her will. No piece in the museum could be removed. Not rearranged, not rehung, not even dusted too aggressively. She believed her arrangement was art itself. So when she died in 1924, she left behind a museum frozen in time, which makes what happened next all the more painful. March 18th, 1990, the heist. It was 1:24 a.m. on a quiet Sunday morning. 2 men rang the side entrance buzzer of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. They were dressed as Boston police officers, complete with mustaches and badges. One was tall, one shorter. They told the guard on duty they were responding to a disturbance. Now, it was after hours. The museum was closed, but the young guard, Rick Abbott, was 23, a Berkeley music student. He'd only been on the job a short while, and protocol was let's say loose. So he buzzed them in. That decision changed everything. The 2 officers entered. One turned to Rick and said, "You look familiar. I think there's a warrant out for your arrest. Come out from behind the desk." Rick obeyed. The next thing he knew, he was in handcuffs. They took him down to the basement, tied him to a pipe. Then they grabbed the second guard as he returned from his rounds and did the same to him. The 2 thieves now had the museum and all its priceless contents completely to themselves for 81 minutes. The theft. They didn't go for the most valuable paintings. They didn't seem rushed. They had a plan. First, they went to the Dutch room, a magnificent gallery filled with the old masters. They took the Storm on the Sea of Galilee, Rembrandt's only known seascape, a dramatic canvas showing a tiny boat tossed in the wild waves. They slashed it out of its frame with a utility knife. They also took A Lady and Gentleman in Black, also by Rembrandt, and a tiny Rembrandt self-portrait etching from a side cabinet. Then, the Concert by Vermeer, one of only 34 known Vermeer paintings in the world, gone. An ancient Chinese bronze also taken. They moved on. In the short gallery, they removed 5 Degas sketches. They're small, intimate, ballet dancers and street scenes, light as a whisper. They also took a bronze eagle finial, a painting by Edouard Manet, Chez Tortoni, and strangely, an ancient French beaker. That was later left behind by the door. When the thieves were done, they returned to the basement, checked on the guards, and then vanished. At 8:15 a.m., the next shift arrived and found the museum dark and silent. The guards were still tied up. The frames were empty. The paintings gone. The aftermath. 13 works were taken that night. Their combined value has been estimated between 200 million and 600 million. Though really, these pieces are priceless. Because you can't just buy a Vermeer. You can't just paint another Rembrandt. These weren't just paintings. They were threads in the fabric of art history. And now, they're gone. But here's where things get stranger. No alarms were triggered. The motion detectors tracked the thieves' path, but didn't catch them anywhere they weren't supposed to be. No fingerprints were left. No security footage. It was all recorded on VHS and overwritten. There were no solid leads. And decades later, the case remains unsolved. The empty frames. The museum, true to Isabella's will, never replaced the stolen paintings. Instead, they left the frames, still hanging, still empty. It's haunting. You walk into the Dutch room and see the empty frame where the storm on the Sea of Galilee once glowed with salt and shadow. It's like a ghost. Or a promise. The FBI launched one of the largest art crime investigations in history. Over 30,000 tips. Searches across Europe. Connections to the IRA, the mafia, underground dealers, even a theory about Vatican involvement. But no arrest, no recoveries, just silence. And that's where we'll pause for now. Coming up in part 2, the suspects, the mafia theories, a strange deathbed confession, and the legacy of loss that still echoes through Boston's art world. Part 2, suspects, secrets, and the mob. Now, where were we? Ah, yes. 13 stolen works, 2 thieves and fake mustaches, and a mystery colder than a Boston February. Let's pick it up from there. This part of the story is where things really start to twist. The art's gone. The empty frames are still on the walls. And the trail? Well, it gets weirder. Because you'd think somebody would try to sell a Vermeer, right? You'd think it would pop up somewhere. In a private collection, on the black market, in a Swiss vault, in a Bond villain's billiard room. But no. Not a single piece has been recovered. Not even a real, verifiable photo. And that means one of 2 things. Either the thieves pulled off the perfect heist and vanished into thin air, or someone, somewhere, is sitting on art they can't move. So who were we? Let's talk suspects. The night guard. We have to start with the inside job theory, because there were no signs of forced entry. And who let them in? Rick Abeth, the 23-year-old night guard. He was a music student, wore Birkenstocks, played in a Grateful Dead cover band, had no criminal record. But he was the one who buzzed the thieves in, against protocol. Now, Rick says he thought they were real cops. It was St. Patrick's Day night. There were always drunk people around Fenway Park. And maybe, just maybe, he thought there'd been some kind of disturbance. But the whole, "You look familiar, there's a warrant out for your arrest" line? Well, that's fishy. Why would a cop say that to a museum guard? And why would Rick step away from the desk? Only place with a panic button. Even stranger, later, investigations showed he had opened and closed a side door briefly that night before the thieves arrived, almost like a test or a signal. He swears it was routine, but the FBI looked at him hard for years. They never arrested him, and to this day, he maintains he had nothing to do with it. But the story doesn't end with Rick. Oh no, because then we get into Boston's underworld. The mob connection. The 1990s were not exactly Boston's golden age of innocence. There were a lot of criminal enterprises floating around. Drug trades, art fencing rings, loan sharking, money laundering. And the FBI quickly began to suspect that this was more than just a thrill-seeking art student prank. This was, well, for lack of a better word, organized. A few names come up over and over. One of the biggest, Carmen the Animal Romano. Yes, that was his actual nickname. Romano was a known mobster with ties to the Merlino gang in Philadelphia and to the New England Mafia. He was suspected of dabbling in art trafficking. He also had connections to a couple of guys in Boston who were known for, well, less than legal activities. But there was no proof. Another major name? Bobby Donati. Bobby was an associate of the notorious Boston gangster Vincent Ferrara. And Bobby had a reputation. Violent, flashy, a collector of fine things. And here's the juicy part. Just weeks before the heist, Bobby Donati was reportedly seen at the museum, casing the joint. One witness said he even asked questions about security, how it worked, where the cameras were, what kind of locks they used. And then, poof, he disappeared. Not disappeared as in hiding from the cops. Disappeared as in unalived. 2 years after the heist, Bobby Donati's body was found in the trunk of a car. Shot, beaten, and left to rot. Was it mob retaliation? A message? Was he silenced because he knew something? We don't know. But what if Donati was trying to steal the paintings to use as leverage? That's something that comes up a lot in art crime. You see, unlike in the movies, stolen masterpieces are not easily to sell. There's no Sotheby's for hot Vermeers. No Craigslist for crows over wheat fields. So what do you do with a Rembrandt you can't sell? Well, you trade it. If you're in trouble, facing federal time, say, You can offer up a lost painting in exchange for leniency. That's happened before. And Donati might have been planning just that. Using the art as collateral to get a mob boss out of prison. Or to negotiate his own legal safety. But if that's true, then where's the art now? Did it change hands? Get hidden in a warehouse? Buried in someone's cellar under floorboards and mold? Or worse, was it destroyed? Now that's the part we don't like to talk about, but it's possible. Paintings are fragile. If handled poorly, rolled, torn, exposed to water or heat, they can be lost forever. And that brings us to one of the saddest possibilities of all. That these pieces, Vermeer, Rembrandt, Degas, are already gone. But not everyone believes that. The letters. In the early 2000s, the museum received several anonymous letters. Typed. Postmarked from the U.S., but unsigned. One of them claimed to have information about the paintings. Said they were safe. Said they'd be returned if the museum agreed not to press charges. And then, silence. Some believed the letters were real. Others thought it was a hoax. But they were specific. One included details about the backs of certain frames that had never been publicly released. The museum tried to follow up, issued public statements, even offered immunity. But whoever wrote the letters never responded again. They vanished, just like the paintings. It's like they were never there. But remember, art leaves a trail. Not always fingerprints, but echoes. You'll find rumors in old auction catalogs, hints in estate sales, whispered mention in prison tapes. Which brings us to the deathbed confession. In 2010, a retired mobster named Robert Gentile was arrested on unrelated charges. Gentile was a known associate of several organized crime figures in New England. When the FBI raided his house, you'll love this, they found a list, a literal, handwritten list of all 13 stolen works from the Gardner Museum, with prices next to each. Now, he claimed it was nothing, just something he copied out of a newspaper. But agents believed otherwise. Especially when another informant claimed Gentile had once offered to sell him the concert by Vermeer for $500,000 in cash. Gentile swore he knew nothing. They kept pressuring him. He went to prison. And then he got out. And then he got sick. And while he was hospitalized, the rumors started swirling that he wanted to talk, that he might be ready to confess where the paintings were. FBI agents visited him, pressed him gently, firmly. But Gentile stuck to his story. He died in 2021, took whatever he knew to the grave. And we're left with fragments, half-truths, dead end, empty frames. Why it matters. You might be thinking, why does this matter? They're just paintings, right? A Rembrandt here, a Vermeer there. We still got plenty. But here's the thing. These paintings were chosen, loved. They belong to a very specific place, to a woman who spent her whole life arranging them just so, who built an entire museum to share them, who walked those halls with gloves and a magnifying glass. They were part of her story, and now they're missing chapters. You can still visit the Gardner Museum. It's beautiful, quiet. The courtyard is full of lights and statues and scent. But when you enter the Dutch room, the atmosphere changes. It's still, not reverent exactly, not mournful, just aware. You see the frame where the storm on the Sea of Galilee used to be. You imagine the brushwork, the boat, the light on the water. And you think, someone took this and never gave it back. You wonder who saw it last. Maybe someone opens a closet once a year and looks at it in secret. Maybe it's in a warehouse wrapped in blankets. Or maybe, and I hate the thought of this, maybe it's in pieces. But here's what I like to believe. That someone, somewhere, is still holding on to it. That they don't even know what they have. That someday it will reappear, dusty, miraculous, and whole. And until then, the frame waits. That's the end of part 2. Coming up in part 3, the legacy of the theft, the Gardner's $10 million reward, what empty art can teach us about memory and beauty, and a very sleepy goodnight under the stars of Boston. Part 3, rewards, echoes, and empty frames. All right, we've come this far. You've met Isabella Stewart Gardner, the firebrand with a pet monkey and a palace full of paintings. You've crept through the Dutch room with 2 thieves in police costumes. You've followed the trail through mobsters, missing letters, deathbed whispers, and empty frames. And still, the art is missing. So now what? What happens to a museum when part of its heart is gone? And what do? We sleepy art students, wandering through the dark halls of history, when a mystery refuses to be solved? Let's sit with those questions a little bit longer. Let's linger in the quiet. Because there's something beautiful, and maybe even a little haunting, about a mystery that resists resolution. But before we drift too far into philosophy, let's talk about the reward. The $10 million carrot. Since shortly after the theft, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum has offered a reward for information leading directly to the recovery of stolen works. And as of now, it's $10 million. That's the largest private reward ever offered in the art world. And it's still active. All 13 pieces, any condition, full immunity possible if you're not the thief. You don't even have to give your name. Just tell someone where they are. Now, you might be thinking, how has no one taken that deal? $10 million? That's life-changing. That's islands. That's vintage wine. That's multiple art school degrees if you're so inclined. And still, no one's come forward. Which makes you wonder, is it because they're afraid? Or is it because they truly can't? Maybe the art has passed through so many hands, its origins are forgotten. Or maybe, and I love this theory, maybe someone has no idea they have it, that it's in a grandfather's attic, or an unexamined storage unit, or behind a fake wall in a house long since sold. That wouldn't be the first time lost masterpieces were found by accident. In 2014, a painting in a New Jersey kitchen was discovered to be a lost Rembrandt. It had been hanging there for decades. In 2016, a stolen Van Gogh was recovered in an Italian mafia hideout, tucked behind insulation. So maybe the Gardner art is still with us, just waiting. Let's take a moment to imagine what that might feel like. You open an old chest. It smells like dust and cedar. You move aside a rolled carpet, and there it is. A small canvas. A group of dancers. A woman in black. And you think, wait, haven't I seen this before? You have. Or rather, you've seen its absence. Because the Gardner Museum doesn't let you forget what was lost. The frames. That's one of the most striking things about the museum. The frames are still there. Not in storage, not replaced, still hanging, just empty. It's heartbreaking and brilliant because Isabella's will forbids altering the arrangement of the artwork even after theft. So those frames remain like placeholders, like ghosts. You stand in front of the space where the concert once hung. Vermeers' quiet interior, a woman at a harpsichord, a man standing beside her, bathed in golden light. And now, it's just space. But that space speaks. It says something was here. Something mattered. Something was taken. And it invites your imagination to fill it in. You become part of the restoration, even if just in your mind. It's like a reverse museum. Instead of seeing what remains, you're seeing what doesn't. And that's a powerful thing. The museum today. The Gardner Museum has changed, of course. It has a new, modern wing now. Light-filled, angular glass and steel. Some people love it. Others miss the quiet mystery of the old wing. But the original building? Still there. Still precious. Still magical. The courtyard is kept lush year-round. There are music programs, art residencies, lectures, late-night events. But the heist is always part of the story. There's a whole section of the museum's website dedicated to it. And every March, on the anniversary, people gather in the Dutch room and leave flowers beneath the empty frames. It's not just about theft anymore. It's about memory, loss, hope. There's even an annual Gardner Heist tour, a candlelit walk through the museum at night, where docents whisper the story like a legend. It's become folklore, a modern myth, and maybe even a meditation. Art that disappears. Let's step back for a second, because this isn't the first time art has vanished. Throughout history, entire bodies of work have been lost. Fires, wars, floods, neglect, We know the names of some artists only through the writings of others. We know of ancient sculptures melted down for their bronze. We know of murals whitewashed, manuscript burned, paintings cut into pieces and restretched as new canvases. Art is vulnerable. Art is ephemeral. And in a strange way, that makes it more powerful, because it reminds us nothing is guaranteed. Even the most beautiful things can vanish. But here's the twist. Sometimes the absence of art becomes art itself. Those empty frames, they're part of the story now. They have meaning. They stir emotion. They create silence where there used to be sound. And that's kind of poetic. We're not meant to be comfortable with it, but we are meant to feel something. And in that way, Isabella's legacy continues. She created a museum full of meaning, not just beauty. Even the losses tell a story. Why this story stays with us. You know, there are more valuable paintings in the world, bigger heists, greater dollar amounts, but none have captured the imagination quite like this one. Why? Maybe it's the setting, that haunting, gorgeous museum in Boston, with its orchids and marble and candlelit glow. Maybe it's Isabella herself, her fierce independence, her vision, her eccentric brilliance. Maybe it's the mystery, the masks, the clockwork efficiency, the fact that they were in and out in under 90 minutes and haven't been seen since. But I think it's something simpler. We hate not knowing. We crave closure, and this heist denies us that. So instead, we imagine, we spin theories, we take tours, we make podcasts and documentaries and sleepy little YouTube videos like this one. And in doing so, we keep the story alive. We keep the art alive. Even the missing parts. Even the shadows. And that's kind of lovely. Part 4. 13 empty frames. All right, art student. You're still with me? Good. We've wandered around the corridors of the crime with candlelight, walked with Rembrandt, and whispered about Vermeer, danced with Degas, and traced a mystery across decades. But before we truly say goodnight, I'd like to linger with the art itself. Let's not forget what we lost, or maybe not lost, just misplaced, tucked away, waiting to be seen again. Each of the 13 stolen works was a story, a voice in Isabella's carefully curated choir. So let's take them one by one, like a midnight tour with the lights off and a soft breeze stirring the curtains. The first work, The Storm on the Sea of Galilee, Rembrandt von Rijn, 1633. This was the painting, the centerpiece of the theft, the one everyone remembers. Rembrandt painted it in 1633 at the height of his early success, just a few years after moving to Amsterdam and opening his studio. He was young, ambitious, and already famous. His work shimmered with drama, light, and emotion. And in this piece, he did something extraordinary. He painted chaos. The painting shows a single moment from the Gospel of Mark. Jesus and his disciples caught in a violent storm on the Sea of Galilee. The boat is pitched at an impossible angle, waves crashing over the side. One man vomits over the edge. Another prays. One fights with the sail, which is tearing in the wind. And oh yes, one turns to look straight out at us. That's Rembrandt. He paints himself into the boat, gripping his hat, wide-eyed, part of the terrified crew. And what makes it all even more astonishing? He wasn't known for seascapes. This was the only one he ever did. Just this one dramatic, cinematic shot of nature's fury and human fear. It used to hang in the Dutch room. You'd walk in, and it was the first thing your eye found. Bold, diagonal, tumultuous, an actual storm frozen in oil. And now it's gone. Only the frame remains. Something is haunting about that, isn't there? A storm that no longer rages, but never really stopped. The second piece, A Lady and Gentleman in Black, Rembrandt van Rijn, 1633. Same year, same room, different mood entirely. If the storm was chaos, A Lady and Gentleman in Black was calm, orderly, still. This is a double portrait, husband and wife, we think, dressed in the height of 17th century Dutch fashion. The man stands at the left, gloved hand resting on a chair. The woman sits stiffly on the right. Both wear black, not because they're in mourning, but because black was expensive, dignified, a sign of wealth and restraint. Rembrandt was a master of light, and here it glows gently across the couple's faces and collars, giving depth to their austere garments. It's a subtle painting, quiet, respectful, but there's a kind of frozen tension between the two figures. They don't touch. They don't smile. There's a space between them, full of mystery. For decades, visitors walked right past it without realizing how rare it was. A Rembrandt double portrait in America from his golden period. And then it was slashed from the frame, rolled up, and never seen again. Some believe it may have been cut in a way that damaged the canvas. Others think it was taken specifically because it was recognizable, but less famous than the storm, making it easier to sell. Either way, it's gone. But in the Dutch room, the frame still stands, an outline of silence. Artwork number 3, Self-Portrait Etching, Rembrandt van Rijn, 1630. The third Rembrandt taken that night wasn't a painting, but a tiny etching, just a few inches across. You could miss it on the wall if you weren't looking closely. And maybe that's what makes its absence feel so intimate. This self-portrait is one of many Rembrandt made in his lifetime. He was, by modern standards, almost compulsive about capturing himself. There are over 80 known self-portraits in various media. This one is early. He's young. Hair is a little wild. His eyes are wide and alert, and his expression is almost comically surprised. You get the sense he didn't pose for it so much as catch himself in the mirror and start scratching the plate before the moment passed. Etchings were meant to be reproduced, sold affordably, and spread across Europe. But this one was special to the Gardner. Isabella bought it herself, a study of an artist before his fame, still figuring himself out. He wouldn't steal it for the money. It's too small, too hard to fence. But maybe that's exactly why someone took it. because they liked it. Or maybe it was just there, an afterthought, nestled among the grand paintings. Either way, it's now among the lost, a whisper of an artist who, even in his youth, was already watching the world with unnerving clarity. The Concert, Johannes Vermeer, 1664. Ah, Vermeer. There's a reason this painting is often described as the most valuable unrecovered artwork in the world. Not just because of its monetary worth, though that's sky high, but because it was a Vermeer, one of only 34 known, and it's gone. The Concert shows a quiet domestic scene. 2 women and a man gathered around a harpsichord. The light is soft and indirect, golden, like late afternoon sun filtering through linen curtains. One woman plays, the other sings, and the man, perhaps a teacher or a companion, stands beside them, attentive. Behind them hang 2 other paintings. One is a pastoral landscape. The other is a bacchanal, a wild, drunken revel. Scholars have long debated this. Vermeer loved contrasts. Private virtue versus public vice. Music versus noise. Intimacy versus spectacle. So this little trio, quietly making music in their parlor, stands in gentle defiance of the world's chaos. The painting is remarkably still, and yet it hums. You feel as if you held your breath, you might hear the faint sound of the harpsichord keys. Isabella hung this treasure in the Dutch room, not far from Rembrandt's stormy sea, balancing chaos with calm. And now, the frame remains, but the music is silent. They took it right off the wall. Can you imagine rolling up a Vermeer in the dark? I can't. And yet someone did, and no one's seen it since. The 5th artwork, Chez Tortoni, Edouard Manet, 1875. Now we cross into 19th century Paris, cafes, cravats, and quiet rebellion. Chez Tortoni was a small portrait, just about 10 by 13 inches. It shows a man, neatly dressed, sideburns trimmed, seated at a table with a glass of wine and a folded newspaper. He's sketching, or perhaps signing a letter, with a delicate, deliberate hand. Behind him, the room is vague, hazy, almost dreamlike. The setting? Chez Tortoni, a famous Parisian cafe known for its intellectual clientele and excellent ice cream. Manet loved painting cafes. He was a flaneur, a stroller, an observer. He captured people not at their most posed, but their most themselves. What's unusual about this theft is that Chez Tortoni wasn't stolen from the galleries. It was taken from a side room, the blue room, near the security desk. The thieves would have had to know it was there, or stumble upon it while moving through the museum. And even stranger, they left the frame. Just took the canvas out, which feels personal, like a decision made on impulse, or maybe a souvenir. Maybe they needed one more painting to feel like they'd succeeded. Maybe they liked the man's face. Or maybe, and I always picture this, maybe he reminded them of themselves. Someone with secrets, Number 6. Landscape with an obelisk. Govert Flink. Formerly attributed to Rembrandt, 1638. Now we come to the first of the maybe not Rembrandts. For years, this painting was believed to be by the master himself. But sometime in the 20th century, scholars reattributed it to Flink, one of Rembrandt's most talented students. And it does feel like a Rembrandt. Dramatic lighting, rich earth tones, architectural elements rising from the natural world. But look a little closer. It's a strange little scene. A wide countryside stretches across the canvas. Small figures travel on horseback along a winding road. And far in the background, an obelisk juts upward toward the clouds. It's oddly placed, both majestic and a little eerie. Obelisks weren't common in Dutch landscapes. So why is it here? It was a reference to memory, as obelisks often marked tombs or significant events. Others believed it was just meant to add mystery, a compositional anchor. Either way, it makes the painting feel like a dream. You're walking through the forest and suddenly you see something ancient, something out of time. It wasn't the most famous painting in the museum, but it was evocative. And the thieves took it. Maybe thinking it was a Rembrandt. And then again, maybe not caring either way. Sometimes value isn't only motive. Sometimes mystery is enough. The 7th artwork, a landscape with figures. Circle of Rembrandt, 17th century. Here's a curious one. This small oil-on-panel landscape wasn't officially cataloged until after the theft, meaning the museum didn't even have a full inventory record of it when it was stolen. It hung near the Rembrandt paintings in the Dutch room, and for many years it was thought to be a minor work by Rembrandt's circle, possibly a student or follower. It depicts a peaceful rural scene. A man and woman walk a path through rolling hills, past grazing animals and distant trees. There's a sense of quiet movement, like the world is turning gently and these figures are just passing through. There's not much scholarly literature on it, which makes its absence feel more ghostly. A painting no one talked about until it vanished. Strangely, it's the most poetic theft of all. To take a forgotten painting is to make it unforgettable. To remove it from view is to make people want to see it. That's the paradox of theft. It turns obscurity into legend. The next 4 or 5 works are on paper by Edgar Degas from the late 1800s. Degas. Edgar Degas wasn't like the other Impressionists. He didn't love plein air painting or soft landscape. He preferred the studio, the practice, the process, the behind-the-scenes reality of the art world. And more than anything, he loved motion. So of course, it's his drawings that feel the most alive. These 5 pieces, all works on paper, done in pencil and ink or watercolor, weren't grand finished paintings. They were studies, snapshots, breath-catching observations of dancers and jockeys in sun-drenched movement. But their intimacy makes their absence feel sharp. So here's a list of the 5 pieces, or 4, depending, that were taken. The first, 3 mounted jockeys, 3 horses, 3 riders. The paper is rough, the lines are quick, but the energy is unmistakable. The lean of the horses' legs, the coiled tension of the riders as they ready themselves for the start. You can almost hear the breath of the animals. Degas adored horse racing, not for the glamour, but for the form. He sketched them obsessively. Dozens of studies of hooves mid-air, reins tight with control. This piece is small, but it gallops. The second, leaving the paddock. Another racetrack moment. A group of jockeys, mounted, is moving slowly out of the gate towards the starting line. There's stillness here, the quiet before the noise. It's not about speed, but anticipation. The figures are rough, unfinished, a few strokes of ink, but there's a story in the minimalism, like overhearing a sentence and imagining the rest of the novel. The third work, Cortège aux environs de Florence, or Procession on a Road Near Florence. This is a curious one, more of a landscape with figures. A narrow procession, perhaps a parade or religious event, winds along a hilly road. The trees bend softly in the breeze. The sky is just awash. This may have been drawn during one of Degas' visits to Italy, where he spent time studying the old masters, but always drifted toward people. Not icons or saints, just people. This drawing feels like a memory, fleeting, and now it really is. The fourth one, Study for the Program, or Study for the Program cover. This piece shows a ballerina, of course. Degas was fascinated by the ballet. Not the performance, but the rehearsal, the sweat, the strain, the moments just before and after grace. This sketch, possibly intended for a printed program cover, shows a dancer mid-stretch, or perhaps resting. The pose is unclear, the body is half-rendered. It's unfinished, but not unfeeling. There's tenderness in the lines. He watched dancers the way most people watch stars, with awe and just a hint of envy. 3 mounted jockeys. Again, possibly a different version or a duplication in records. Yes, this title appears twice in various sources. Either a duplication or 2 separate but similar drawings. In either case, they're all gone. 5 little pieces, no big frames, no golden plaques. But they were pieces of Degas' mind, moments he saw, tried to catch, and let rest on paper. And now, they're floating somewhere else. Maybe rolled in a tube, maybe destroyed, or maybe, just maybe, someone still takes them out from time to time and lets them breathe. The 13th work, a Chinese bronze gu, or beaker, Shang Dynasty, 1200 to 1100 BCE. This one feels like it slipped in from another dimension. A bronze gu is not a painting, it's a vessel. A tall, narrow beaker used during the Shang Dynasty in ancient China over 3,000 years ago. It would have been used in rituals, offerings, ancestor worship, a symbol of lineage and reverence and power. It's heavy, carved with intricate decorations, stylized dragons, perhaps. The bronze darkened with age, glowing faintly green with oxidation. It's the kind of object that hums if you listen close enough. Old energy. Isabel loved it. She placed it in the short gallery, among textiles and curiosity, near paintings, but apart from them. And somehow, during the theft, one of the men picked it up and took it. No painting would have made that same metallic clink in the bag. Was it chosen for its value? Or did one of the thieves simply feel drawn to it? I sometimes think they didn't even know what it was. But the goo is one of the most tragic losses. Because even in museums, very few Shang bronzes exist outside of Asia. And this one was ours. The last thing stolen, the Napoleonic eagle finial, France, early 1800s. And now, the oddest of them all, this wasn't painting or a sculpture, and that's why it isn't counted in the 13 pieces of art reported by the FBI. It was a gilded bronze eagle, about 10 inches tall, the kind that once sat atop a Napoleonic military flag. It's a finial, a decorative top piece, heavy and full of meaning. In the Napoleonic era, each battalion carried its own flagpole covered or crowned with an eagle. Soldiers swore loyalty to it. Losing your eagle in battle was a disgrace. Guarding it was an honor. Isabella acquired this one, perhaps from a collector or estate sale, and displayed it in the short gallery, on a pole, like a relic from another time. And during the theft, the thief wrenched it off. Why? No one knows. Was it a trophy? A symbol? A whim? There's something beautifully absurd about it. All these priceless paintings and a sculpture, and then a stolen eagle. Sometimes theft is planned. Sometimes it's improvisation. But this little eagle, gold and defiant, went with them into the dark. And it hasn't been seen since. Epilogue. The art that waits. And now you've met them all. 13 pieces. Paintings, sketchings, bronze, paper, gold. Each one chosen or stumbled upon in the chaos of a single night. Each one carried off and never returned. We don't know where they are. We don't know who took them. But we remember them. We walk past their empty frames. We whisper their names in gallery corners. We imagine them, not just hanging, but breathing. Art does that. Even when it's stolen, it keeps asking to be seen. A sleepy goodbye. All right, sleepy friends. We've wandered long enough tonight. From Isabella's drawing rooms to Boston's dark alleys, from Dutch seascapes to empty walls, we followed the clues, traced the suspects, and let our imaginations feel the frames. And maybe, just maybe, you're feeling a little heavier now, a little slower, like a Degas dancer at the end of rehearsal, shoes off, hair loose, sitting in the glow of a single gas lamp. Let your breath slow down. I'm sure the paintings are still out there, somewhere. And even if we never see them again, we know they mattered. That's the thing about art. It leaves fingerprints, even when the canvas is gone. Good night, art student. Sleep well. I'll see you next time.